Hello, I'm Matt Swain. I'm the Director of Education for Kite Academy Trust, and we've made this short video to give all of our parents and carers a little bit more information about the revised Kite curriculum which we launched in 2023-24. We're going to look at the curriculum in a little bit of detail and look at some of the changes we've made, and then we're going to talk about what that means for pupils and what their day looks like and their week looks like, and finally we'll look at what it means for them in the classroom. What small changes we made to how we teach our subject to make sure that every pupil gets the very best deal. Before we begin to talk about the changes to the curriculum itself, let's first remind ourselves of the Kite Academy Trust mission. Have a quick read of this. And at the heart of this statement, this mission statement, is the phrase all our children. And this was at the heart of the revisions we made to our curriculum for this year. We wanted every child to feel success in every lesson and have the very best chance to learn and remember the things they're taught. Now let's have a look at the Kite Academy Trust vision. And this is how we're going to achieve our mission. Have a quick read of this. And just like with the mission, some key words and phrases were plucked from this to be at the centre of our thinking as we revised our curriculum offer for all our pupils for this year. First and foremost was that term inclusive. It was essential for us when we redesigned and revised the curriculum offer that every pupil had every chance of success in every lesson. And so we had to think hard about what the curriculum looked like for each subject and how it was taught. We also wanted to speak on our locality. We wanted the curriculum that we offered our pupils to speak on where they live and where they're from and their backgrounds. And so that again was at the centre of our thinking as we designed our new curriculum offer. Let's now look at a couple of quotes from the current Ofsted framework. Have a read of this first one. And as you can see, in blue, I've highlighted the phrase coherently planned and sequenced. And what this means is that for every one of the national curriculum subjects, the learning needs to be progressive from year 1 up until year 6. So it needs to be planned in a sensible and intelligent way so that learning in year 2 builds on learning in year 1 and learning in year 6 builds on learning in year 5. And now read this one. And you'll see here we've highlighted the term full and a broad range of subjects. And this was incredibly important to us at the Kite Academy Trust. It was reasonably typical in many primary schools under the previous Ofsted framework to focus most of their curriculum efforts and time on English and mathematics, as they were used as a way of measuring school success, both through outcomes and during Ofsteds. The framework though for Ofsted inspections changed a few years ago, and schools were refocused to ensure that all pupils had given opportunity to learn in all subjects. And so what was essential was that all of the national curriculum subjects had time to breathe and time to be taught and enjoyed within the school year by each and every pupil. This was a real challenge for all primary schools across the UK, as suddenly subjects like history and geography and DT, which had often been combined together under a catch-all approach like topic, had to find their feet in the timetable and become subjects in and of themselves. And this was a huge piece of work for a sector in education that is more generalist than secondary. But we at Kite Academy Trust have the advantage of being able to work together. And so over last year, led by myself and my colleague Sarah Constant, we made revisions to each of our curriculum subjects to ensure that each one of them stood alone and stood tall in the timetable. And this is important, and it's important because all pupils should have the opportunity to feel success at school. And previously, many pupils who were possibly less successful in mathematics or English had a less than enjoyable school week because they didn't have the opportunity to show their strength and their success in PE or design technology or computing or languages or history or geography. But under the new framework from Ofsted and in our curriculum, every child has every success over the school week and the school year to show what they're great at and also to get help with the subjects they need support with. And here we have a list of all the national curriculum subjects taught in the primary phase. Those in blue are considered to be core subjects, essential for life and future success. Reading and phonics and writing are often combined in many primary schools into one lesson which will be referred to as English. But at the Kite Academy Trust, we distinguish between the two, allowing them both their own time in the timetable. And then you'll see the other subjects: religious education, history, physical education, PSHE, geography, computing, DT, music, French and art, all of which have their own statutory national curriculums, and all of which every child has an entitlement to during their time spent in the primary phase. But before we move on and talk about pupils' weekly timetable and yearly overviews and what their school day feels like and what lessons feel like, let's just first take a step back and talk about reading. As I mentioned, we place reading in the timetable as its own lesson because reading itself is the most important skill that we can bestow upon any child that is in our academies. And it has to be at the heart of everything we do. So not only does it have its own timetabled lesson, but it also infiltrates every other subject with reading opportunities available in science and history, but also even PE. We also work really hard in a school day to design opportunities for pupils to read books of their choosing. And we'll talk about those a little later when we come to the timetable. Let's now have a look at our reading curriculum for years 2 to 6. And obviously I don't mention year 1 because in year 1 and in early years is where most pupils will secure their understanding of the phonetic code, their ability to decode the letters on the page and turn them into words. But from year 2, this is our reading curriculum. And unlike any other subject, it's not a list of statements. Instead, it's a sequence of books, because to become a better reader, you need to practice your reading skills with increasingly complex texts. Let's for a second have a look at this, our reading curriculum for year 2. And you'll see here at the start of year 2, the pupils read The Secret Garden, abridged Ladybird classic. And this book, The Secret Garden, is slightly more complex than the last book they read in their reading lesson, which is the abridged Jungle Book, but slightly less complex than the next book they'll read, which is Oliver Twist. A huge amount of thought and time has been put into sequencing and selecting these texts for our pupils to ensure that every book they read in their reading lesson as a class is slightly more difficult than the one before, so that they as readers become increasingly more fluent and more capable of comprehending language. And this canon continues all the way to year 6. For more information on reading, and in fact any of our curriculum subjects, please pop onto the curriculum page on your Academy's website and have a look at the various pieces of paperwork, the subject overviews, the year overviews, and have a watch of the curriculum videos. The reading video is a slightly longer one, but we'll go into a little bit more detail about how we teach this essential subject. And here's a quote from an HMI inspector who came to look at one of our schools in the second week of the 2023-24 term, reflecting on the changes we've made to reading provision. Let's now look at a typical timetable for any of our pupils in year 1 to 6. But before we do this, it's important to say that for many of our pupils in year 1, this is not the timetable that they will begin with at the start of their journey through Key Stage 1 and 2. And it is highly likely that most of our year 1 pupils will be experiencing learning a lot more akin to that they experienced in early years in September of their first year in Key Stage 1. By half term though, many of our pupils in most of our academies will have moved towards a timetable that looks more like this. So let's talk this timetable through, and it is a model timetable. Schools will differ slightly in the length of sessions, but broadly it should speak on what the school day looks like for most of our children in most of our academies. As you see, we begin the day with 10 minutes for registration and retrieval questions, and during this point in the day pupils will be registering ready for the school day and completing some quizzes to help them remember the things they've learnt before. And directly following this in most year groups is mathematics. This is an hour-long lesson that takes pupils up until assembly, and that's every single day of the week, every single week of the year. Then most of our pupils will then go to assembly, whilst those on that day that required a little bit more time with their teachers to secure that step in learning attend what we call a catch-up session, where they get an extra 20 minutes just to secure that step before they move on. After assembly, we have reading, and as I mentioned earlier, it's a discrete lesson in our timetable. And for more information on that, please go to the reading tab on the websites. And then break. Finally, before lunch, we have an hour of writing, and this will include practice around handwriting and spelling. And then we arrive at lunch. You'll see from the morning that each of those lessons is deliberately kept discrete from the others. And this ensures that there is no bleed between lessons. Often when you have maths followed by reading, then assembly, maths overruns, reading gets lost, and over the school year that has quite a significant impact on pupils' learning. And so we've designed a timetable to ensure that every lesson gets the time it's allotted. We get to lunch and then registration too. You'll see there under that it says read for pleasure, and during registration all of our pupils in years 1 to 6 have the opportunity to read their own book. It's a really important part of the school day that we've introduced this year, and one that's really taken off for pupils. So as the teacher takes the register, the pupils calmly and quietly take a book out that they've chosen and read it and enjoy it. Once the teacher has completed the register, they'll also take their own book out and read that, modelling to the pupils the importance of reading. And just before we begin afternoon lessons, the teacher will take a wander around the classroom and talk to some of the children about the books they're reading, what they're enjoying, maybe what they're not enjoying, whether they recommend it and who to. It's a really calm, enjoyable start to the afternoons, which settles the class and allows every child to spend a bit of time with a book they choose and enjoy. And that leads us into the afternoon. As you'll see, we have large blocks of subjects, and so we see here on a Monday in this example timetable, science is taught over the whole afternoon for an hour and 40 minutes. In the middle of that you see this daily mile, and this is a slot of activity that the pupils engage in every single day other than the day in which they have PE, And the teacher selects at what point to take them outside for that active run around. It may not be exactly 60 minutes after the science begins, but is usually at a point where the pupils are ready for a break and ready to be re-energized before returning to complete their lesson. But what you will see here is a substantial amount of time in the timetable is given to science, and science itself is taught every single week of the year in every single term apart from the final summer half term. Then we see history, again a similar profile in the calendar, an hour and 40 minutes of history broken by 15 minutes of daily activity, again the same for RE, and then we see almost the same for art, but there we have a short French lesson. And French begins within our academies in January this year, and from January it will be taught every single week for 20 minutes all year throughout Key Stage 2. And finally you'll see PE. And PE has been given a huge slot in the timetable, with around an hour and 40 minutes each week. So that's the 60 minutes plus the 40 plus the 15, with 20 minutes given over in that slot to PSHE. And again, PSHE, like PE, are taught all week, all year. I'm going to talk to you a little bit in a second about why we chose to deliver PE that way. But first, let's finish the school day. So just before pupils go home, you'll see we've got class read. And that's when the teacher has an opportunity to read a book with the pupils for the pupils. And the children get to sit back and listen and get lost in a story with their teacher and leave the school and the school day calmly and positively. Let's just talk a little bit more then about PE. This is a set of aims for the PE National Curriculum. Have a quick read. I just want to draw your attention to this aim here and then this aim here. Let's talk first about this one. If we want pupils to engage in competitive sports and activities, it's incredibly important they have enough time to do so in the timetable. As a teacher, I always found it incredibly restrictive and difficult to deliver PE in an hour. There was never enough time to warm up, practice skills, engage in a full competitive competition, and then warm down. And invariably, pupils got a diluted offer. By giving PE far more time over a sustained period in the timetable each week, all pupils get the chance to engage in all aspects of PE, including enjoying and engaging in competitive sports over sustained periods of time. And that, we see, is another key aim of the curriculum. And also we wanted to ensure that all our pupils learn to lead healthy, active lives and developed positive habits around exercise, hence the daily mile. So on the days they're not doing PE, all pupils engage in regular activity with their class, developing those habits of health and exercise in each of them. But of course, one of the challenges here with so many subjects is creating the right balance in your curriculum and in your timetable. And it's important to recognise that every single subject is quite substantial. This is the National Curriculum for History. And so it's important to ensure that, as that's a statutory national curriculum, every pupil gets every chance to study all aspects of that over their time in primary school. So when revising and redesigning our curriculum offer, we made sure that for each and every subject, we completed the national curriculum coverage so that no pupil did not receive their statutory offer. And in fact, in most subjects, we've gone over and above and we teach them more than exists within the national curriculum. And the way we do this is through block teaching. So in the timetable we looked at, you would see that many of those subjects we've spoken earlier weren't visible, and that's because we believe that it's more effective to teach pupils one subject well at depth over a sustained period of time than to bounce around subjects for short periods of time every single week. So here you'll get an overview of how that pans out over the year. So the example we looked at, we'll see that that's replicated here. In autumn 1 and 2, all children do PE and PSHE, and in fact that will go throughout the year. And in years 2 to 6, they'll complete history for that 12 to 14 week period, whereas in year 1, they'll complete studies around geography for an afternoon a week. Science again takes a further afternoon, and then RE. And finally, art. And then in spring, those subjects swap out in some areas. PE and PSHE remain as does science, but now we see design technology. The recurrence of RE, but also computing and music, and a swap over in years 1 and 2 and 6 between history and geography. And finally, that's rounded off in summer with some more DT, more music, more computing, and some more art. So that's a look at the school week, the school year, and some of the changes we've made to ensure that every one of our pupils gets the best opportunity to access every aspect of the national curriculum and enjoy and learn in every lesson. But let's now talk about some of the changes we've made to how we teach the children in our academies, especially when we think about those afternoon lessons and those foundation national curriculum subjects. And before we do this, I want to talk to you a little bit about this. This is David Willingham's simple memory model, and it's an essential, seminal explanation of how we learn, and it underpins and has underpinned all teacher training over the last 5 years. And it's really important to understand this because it explains how children learn and also how adults learn. And in understanding this, we can understand how best to teach our pupils. So I'm going to talk you through it as best I can. I'm going to start with the environment. So the environment is the place you're in. It's the sounds and the things you can see and the things that are happening at any one point. And it's full of stimuli, full of various stimuli. So a classroom will have a whiteboard and a teacher and windows and weather outside and, and pupils doing various things and corridors and noises from beyond. And all of these things are competing for a pupil's attention at any one time. And of course, we want them to attend to the lesson itself. And they can only attend to a handful of these stimuli. And we want to give every child the best chance of attending to the thing that matters. And so we'll work really hard this year to minimise the distractions in the environment. First of all, we've made sure that all pupils are facing the board as a default. Of course, when they're in group work, they're facing each other and tables are pushed together in pods. But in the first instance, the best chance a child's got of paying attention to the teacher is if they're facing the teacher and facing the board, not sat facing a wall or facing a window. So almost all lessons begin with pupils facing the front of the classroom. We've also ensured that other classes may be transitioning to PE or to music around the school travel quietly. And this serves two purposes. First of all, it ensures that for those pupils still in the classroom, they're not being distracted by noise in the corridors next to them. But it also ensures that those pupils in the corridors are travelling safely and are able to hear any teacher instructions. So we've worked really hard to make the environment itself conducive to the pupils attending the learning and having the best chance of success. This is particularly effective for pupils with SEND, where a calm, quiet, predictable environment best supports their learning. So we have the environment, it's full of stimuli, and we've worked really hard to make sure we've minimised some of the stimuli that we can, giving our pupils the best chance of listening to the teacher's explanation and looking at the board as the teacher takes them through the lesson. But of course, there will be points in the lesson when they talk to the person next to them, or talk in groups, or even work together on a design technology project. And at that point, we rearrange the classroom to support them with that. But as a default, at the point the teacher's teaching, all our pupils have the best chance of learning because they're looking at the teacher. So that this gives them a chance to attend to that most important of stimuli, the lesson itself. And if they attend to that, then they'll think about it. So what we attend to, we think on in our working memory. Here, that's where we do our thinking. And working memory is really interesting. So working memory is limited. And that means it can basically hold 3 to 5 pieces of information at any one time. Any more than that, and it becomes overloaded and struggles. And you can probably understand that by thinking about how much more difficult it is to remember a 10-digit number than a 4-digit one. That's because your working memory can only really deal with so much data. And we know that's the same of all humans. And so we paid attention to this when we thought about how we designed our lessons. What we had to move away from was 30 to 35 minute teacher explanations in science lessons about absorption, or in history lessons about the cause of the Industrial Revolution, which will be overwhelming for many pupils, and towards breaking that learning down, that same learning down, into smaller chunks, make it more palatable and giving every child a better chance of success. So if we can hold things on working memory, that learning the teachers talk about, we'll then think on them. And if we think hard about that information, we call that learning. And when we learn something, it goes into our long-term memory. And unlike working memory, this is an infinite space, like an infinite hard drive. Infinite amounts of things can be learned if we think hard enough about them. But that doesn't make them useful. To make memories useful, and this won't surprise you, we have to regularly remember them. And so throughout our school day, in every single lesson, pupils have an opportunity to remember the things they've learned before. And that might be through a short quiz, or it might be through demonstrating and re-practicing a skill they've learned. But in every lesson, we had to give them opportunity, because if we don't remember things that we've previously understood and learned, they become what we probably call forgotten. And you should be able to sort of think on that in your own experiences, on the thousands upon thousands of things that you've learned at any one time in your life, through reading articles and talking to people and being in education, and how few of those remain. Lots and lots of things you'll have understood, but many of those things will have been forgotten. And that's because you haven't actively used them. You haven't had a cause to remember them or a cause to practice them. Well, the national curriculum is important, and so we make sure that our pupils have opportunities in every lesson to remember the things they've learned and understood before. And so when considering this model of how we learn, we thought about how can we adapt our teaching or revise our teaching practice to ensure it gives every child the best chance in every lesson. So the first thing we did was to break the learning in each lesson down to small pieces. So rather than teach about all of the causes of the Industrial Revolution in one go, we'd teach them one cause at a time. And after we've explained the first cause, we checked that all of the pupils understood that before moving on to the second one. And then we'd make sure that there were opportunities in each lesson to make everything that pupils have learned memorable through quizzes or practice. And finally, we knew that quizzing and practice alone isn't enough to make memories useful. What we need to do is to link pupils' learning together. They didn't design the science curriculum, so they don't necessarily know why this thing we learned today is connected to the thing we learned last week or something we learned a year before. And so in every lesson we explicitly tell the children how the thing they learned today is related to things they've learned before, and also how it's going to relate to things they're going to learn in the future. A bit like giving pupils the jigsaw pieces and the picture on the box to help them put it all together. And we call those the active ingredients of our teaching. Things you'll see in every lesson, in every subject throughout the school day. And to support with that, we designed our subjects in a way that allowed them to be taught in this way. So here's some examples of lessons that can be found in our progression maps for each subject across some year groups. Here we see a year 3 lesson about finding out what a wash is. So what is a wash is the question we're trying to answer over that hour and 40 minutes. And over that hour and 40 minutes, the pupils will move through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps in learning. First, they'll learn that watercolour is a painting method where paints are made with a water-based solution. And the teacher will teach them this as a single piece of information. They might look at examples of watercolour. They might compare watercolour paints to other types of paints. They may engage some activities around watercolour. And then once the teacher feels the pupils are starting to understand, they'll check they understand. And if they do, the lesson will move on and they'll learn the next piece of knowledge. And that's to know that saturation refers to purity or intensity of a colour. And you'll see here that logically you can only teach about saturation if you understand what watercolour is in the first place. And so these are sequentially designed. And again, the lesson continues. Let's look at some more examples. Here's a year 2 history lesson about how life has changed since 1950s for year 2. Here there are only 4 pieces of knowledge and small steps we want to teach the children. But some of these may take a little bit longer than others. And here's a year 6 RE lesson. This one was 6 steps. But again, these might just take a little less time. So what does this mean for lessons? So no matter what your child's being taught, then this is what the lessons will feel like. Across that hour and 40 minutes in the foundation, or that hour in maths or writing, the learning will be broken into phases, small mini lessons around each point in knowledge. They'll be different in length depending on that piece of knowledge. One might only take 10 minutes, one might take 35 or 40. But each mini phase in that lesson will focus on securing children's understanding of that particular idea or concept. Then after that's been taught to all the pupils, the teacher will check every child's understanding. They'll make sure every child understands that idea before they move on to the next piece of knowledge in that lesson. And that will be repeated and repeated and repeated and repeated. But it's only by checking every child's understanding can we be sure that they're ready to move on and also to, in the future, have an opportunity to remember it. If at any point some pupils don't understand, then of course the teacher will go back and reteach that problematic area so that they do. So that's your typical lesson. But every lesson begins with a quiz or some practice. So whether it's PE or art or history or maths or writing, every lesson begins with the pupils remembering what they've done before. A short quiz or a short practice, depending on whether it's something that they know or know how to do. And then once they've done that, and before the lesson begins proper and the questions introduced that they're trying to answer that day, the teacher will make links between what they're learning today and the things they've learned before. They'll say to them, today we're going to be learning about igneous rocks in science, and this is going to link to when you studied volcanoes in year 3 in spring term. And next week we're going to learn about other types of rocks, which is going to link to other parts of geography, including rivers. So now we come to the end of this video on the changes to the Kite Academy Trust curriculum and to the implementation of that curriculum in the classroom. We hope you found it useful. It is broad brushstrokes. It doesn't cover every aspect of the school day and doesn't go into detail around every lesson, every subject, but hopefully it's enough. I would like to point you to your Academy websites where you can look at curriculum overviews for each subject, which will show you the journey of science from year 1 to year 6, the same for history, PE, PSHE and art, etc. It will also give you, there's also an overview of each subject and a subject video which explains the aims and rationale for each of the subjects we teach. And finally, and probably most useful for parents and carers, is a year group yearly overview. And this shows you what your child's going to learn each term over their year. I'm going to finish the video there, but please, if you have any questions, in the first instance, get in touch with your school leaders for your own child's academy. But if you wish, you can also contact me at matthew.swain@kite.academy. Thanks for your time. I hope this is useful.